Hey everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd. You know who it is? Progressive rock, the whitest music ever, according to the September 2017 issue of The Atlantic, in this article written by Mr. James Parker. I've been getting so many tweets and emails and messages to talk about and react to this article. I've read it over several times, and honestly, I don't see what is so terrible about it in terms of it being like so bad I need to do a stink piece, I need to do a huge reaction to this thing. Honestly, this is sort of subpar and mediocre in the same way that a lot of culture writing and especially music writing is very subpar and mediocre and really inflammatory too. This is mostly guilty of being inflammatory, but really not even in the text of the article itself. I mean, the most inflammatory part of this article is really just its clickbaity title, which I have to assume was just the result of a click-hungry editor who read the article over looking for the stickiest, hookiest line in the whole thing, grabbed sort of an idea from these couple of lines that made reference to progressive rock being the whitest music ever, and then sort of threw that as the headline. Whereas actually a bulk of the article here isn't really about progressive rock being white or even the whitest music ever. It's really just kind of a single piece reflected from a single quote from a member of a single band that basically kind of makes that very small point, very weakly, I might add. But really, it's not what the bulk of the article is about. I mean, listen, James Parker is really no friend of progressive rock. He doesn't care for it. He makes that very obvious at numerous points in the article. He obviously favors the punk that came right after it. But he does go into a lot of deep historical detail about the genre. Now, mind you, a lot of it isn't a complete picture. Okay, if you want a complete picture, maybe read Dave Weigel's book that's actually, referenced in this article, which seems to be the reason this entire piece exists, because The Atlantic wanted to write a piece sort of centered around the release of a relevant book, which is kind of another reason that this thing exists. This article, which is kind of another reason it annoys me. It seems like this piece exists just to kind of be a reaction to this book, as opposed to a writer's legitimate opinions because he felt like he just had a really strong something he had to say about progressive rock, and that's why the article exists. Again, it sort of seems like it's just merely in reaction to this book, but I digress. Here's what I actually think is weak about the article and the points that I actually think are terrible and are worth kind of sussing out a little bit. Again, much of the piece, in my opinion, is fine. It's mostly just a historical, contextual description of progressive rock with James kind of here and there jabbing at it a little just to kind of say, but I'm reminding you, I don't really like it. I don't really care for it. And to me, it doesn't really make sense to go into this much detail, put in this much effort to understand and explain progressive rock, only to just offhandedly dismiss it and everything that it did in the last few paragraphs without having really provided the information to kind of prove your point or, really kind of drive home what exactly you're trying to convince the audience of. But again, he sort of states his opinion without really backing it up or doing anything that would convince a progressive rock fan or even somebody who's critically minded who really may not know all that much about progressive rock. But, again, he just sort of dismisses progressive rock without really saying much about his opinion or backing it up all that much. And also this idea in the article that the lead singer from The Nice sort of said, this is European rock music. This is a European artistic expression here. It's not black music. It's not blues music. And then he sort of took that to sort of reflect upon the entirety of the progressive rock genre, which is actually total bullshit because, yes, while The Nice does have their connections to the world of legitimate progressive rock because they were sort of a proto-progressive rock band, they're not a very relevant band. Neither is the singer of the band, and you're sort of taking this one quote and assuming that the rest of the progressive rock world would actually agree with what he's saying, that progressive rock is disconnected from blues music, that it's divorced from black music on the whole, which actually couldn't be further from the truth. I mean, Jethro Tull, who you reference in this article in sort of a, tongue-in-cheek kind of way, Ian Anderson was greatly influenced by the flute playing of Roland Kirk, who is one of my favorite jazz artists of all time, one of the greatest jazz artists of all time. You can't sort of just say that progressive rock is so white that it lacks any sort of palpable influence from black music and black artists when the connections are clearly there. Like 21st century, 21st Century Schizoid Man, the jammier parts of that song don't contain influences from jazz and from blues music. Have you never fucking heard Pink Floyd's Money? Like, that song is so deeply influenced by blues, it should be making, every blues artist fucking roll in their grave. Because, it's kind of a weird kind of progressive bastardization of the sound, but it's clearly influenced by it. Again, you can't act like the whole genre is just completely separated from black music because, God, rock is in the title. How separate from the history and the roots of black music can you get if you're continuing to play rock music? The closest that I could think of are artists like... maybe Television or some of the big krautrock bands, but even they have kind of fundamental influences from the world of rock music in America that greatly influence what they did. So, even they can't completely escape the roots of rock music. You can't just be like, okay, well, this is like white music now. Like, that's a pipe dream. And honestly, that's really not anything that I've seen any credible, progressive rock, artists sort of say or claim. You're only sort of basing off of this quote from this dude from The Nice, who, again, not really that much of a credible voice in the progressive rock world. Is Robert Fripp saying this shit? No. Is Roger Waters saying this shit? No. I'm trying to think of who else. Is, again, Ian Anderson saying this shit? No. Moving on from there, we have this implication that music that is inherently white or performed mostly by white artists is like bad or something or inferior. I kind of already disproved the fact that the idea rather that progressive rock is disconnected from black music. Couldn't be further from the truth. There's so much stylistic and influential crossover from jazz to progressive rock that, that should basically be a no-brainer. You'd have to be stupid not to hear it and see it. But to further sort of go down that road, God forbid a group of white people do anything. Why is a group of white guys making a type of music inherently bad or terrible or, maybe even a little evil? If that's the metric we're working by and progressive rock is like inherently bad or silly or dumb or not worth taking seriously because it's so white, you obviously love the shit out of punk in this article. Punk would be the fucking runner-up for the second whitest genre of music. And yes, I know that punk, grabs a lot of influence from blues music, and there are a lot of artists of color in the punk community. I get it, and I understand that. But a lot of the genre's biggest artists and most influential artists are white. And that's kind of the same case for progressive rock. So, we could kind of just cast that same stupid shadow of doubt onto punk, which is just as dumb and just as illegitimate in that context as it is in the prog context. I only use that as an example to sort of highlight how stupid this point is. And finally, to sort of say that progressive rock was just an evolutionary red herring and didn't really influence anything, it didn't really sort of bear any musical or artistic children, is just not right whatsoever. That's provably wrong every single time a musician of note is wearing a Dark Side of the Moon t-shirt, Jesus Christ, God damn it. 21st Century Schizoid Man was sampled in a song off of My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. Progressive metal is a thing. Fuck. Almost every single wing of the metal world is inspired by progressive rock to some degree. The lore, the epic song structures, the, tendency to avoid earworms. That's like metal to a T. So, to sort of act like that, progressive rock just died and nothing happened after that, it was just over, is just, really disingenuous and not historically accurate. So I don't know. That's just pretty much it. Kind of dumb clickbaity article. Again, a lot of the historical descriptions here are pretty cool and fine. And James can certainly dislike progressive rock if he so likes. Nobody says he's got to like progressive rock, and progressive rock isn't for everybody. It is kind of a niche thing. I get it. It is kind of campy. It is kind of weird. It's not going to appeal to everyone. However, to sort of say that it is so white that it's completely disconnected from black music, not correct at all. To say that it didn't influence anything and that it's just a musical red herring, not correct, not factually accurate. And finally, to act like that just because progressive rock, or any genre really, is white means that it's bad or that it's irrelevant or that it should be taken less seriously or made a mockery of, made a mockery of in a shitty article in The Atlantic, is also kind of ridiculous too. So there you go. Those are my thoughts on this booty article. Here's another video next to my head that you should check out. You're the best, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.